Hi everyone. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, I'm the new curatorial assistant at the Hunterian, and I'm doing this presentation today in conjunction with a family day that's going to be tomorrow in the gallery, if anyone wants to come along to that. It's led by Sarah Jane Smith from the Visitor Service Experience team, and they'll be offering family tours and lots of family activities if anyone wants to come. But today I thought I'd do a bit of a brief overview of women's stories in the gallery and discussing the intersection of art and education and gender in our collection. So I'll get started. So I thought I'd set us up by looking at where this collection comes from. And so our collection's formed from the collection of William Hunter, who was an anatomist and doctor during the 18th century. Anatomy and art have a long and interconnected history. And anatomy was taught in lots of formal art schools. And Hunter also did this, teaching the Royal Academy in their foundational year anatomy classes. And I bring up the Royal Academy because the Royal Academy, when it started, was seen as quite a progressive group, having two female artists in part of its founding group. But as we can see in this print, the women artists, Angelica Kaufman and Mary Moser, are pictured in portraits on the wall instead of in person like the rest of the men in the group. So this is not just in the print, but in their real lives. They were barred from Hunter's anatomy lessons, life drawing classes, and social events, perpetuating their exclusion from art education and social circles. So in portrait bay 1 of the gallery, we see this portrait, which is of Louise Jopling by Whistler. She was a successful painter in her own right who exhibited at the Royal Academy and became one of the first women members of the British Society of Women Artists. She was an active member of the women's suffrage movement and wrote an essay titled On the Education of the Artistic Faculty in 1903, where she argued that women should be educated on equal terms with men. 10 years after this painting was done, she opened up a school for female artists, affording them the ability to paint from life in the same way that men were, which was often barred for women. And we can see this pictured in two of the images here. So what's interesting about this is the voyeuristic kind of perspective that Whistler paints this picture in, with her facing the wall and with her back away from the audience. And I think it's really obvious when compared with this photograph here. She is represented more as a form than as a person, and this is added to by the naming of the portrait, harmony and flesh tone and black, which removes the person completely from the portrait. This portrait encapsulates the portrait encapsulates his view of her, but doesn't encapsulate the life of her. And how can we as a gallery present this picture of her full life when we've only got these portraits? So the naming of a painting, as discussed, can be used to remove agency from female sitters. Similarly, how women name themselves can shine a light on the difficulty women face being taken seriously in art establishments that valued the work of men. So this is artwork from the artist Beatrix Whistler, and she's pictured in the centre. She was a contemporary of Louise Jopling and the wife of James McNeill Whistler, and she, like Jopling, exhibited her work at the Royal Society of British Artists, and many of her artworks are kept in the Hunterian collections. Throughout her life, she was surrounded by successful artists in successful artistic circles. And she was almost given a formal art education by her father, John Burney Phillips, a sculptor, who let her work in his studio in Chelsea. Despite this quite formalised education and her privileged artistic associations, Beatrix still used a pseudonym, Rick Spinney, to appear more masculine when showing her work, and named herself as a student of Whistler's, to avoid being judged as an amateur female artist. This really highlights the broader challenges faced by women artists, even ones in successful and affluent circles. So when you come into the next bay of the gallery, you see this painting, which is called Memories of the Sea by Josephine Haswell Miller. The artist Miller was a member of the Glasgow School of Art and a teacher there, and she became the first woman to become a member of the Royal Scottish Academy, a role she achieved in 1938, 2 years after painting this picture. This painting uses the characteristics of a Dutch still life, a form of painting which usually expresses the idealized domestic space. However, in this painting, A Still Life by a Woman, the theme is subverted and displays a still life which is yearning for exploration and to be out of the home. The possibilities of imagination and the objects are pushed to the limits of their imagination, and it yearns to be see the world outside. What's interesting for me about this is the kind of glamorization of the age of explorers. So the figure in the corner is a figure who was a famous explorer called Comte de la Pérouse. And this indicates the colonial focus of this painting, which glamorizes the European exploration and colonization on indigenous people and their lands. And I think what this painting really asks is, when we don't have the perspective of colonized people and indigenous voices in our collection, how do we tell their stories? And can we really say that we're telling the full story of Women's Day when we don't have their voices in the gallery? So then we come to the modern art gallery section, modern art section of the gallery, where we've got work by the op artist Bridget Riley. Riley is an artist who's courted controversy by her continual dismissal to be labelled a woman artist. In her essay, Hermaphrodite, she wrote, "I've never been aware of my femininity as such when in the studio, nor do I believe that male artists are aware of an exclusive masculinity when they are at work." And I think her work displays this unwillingness to be classed by gender. There is nothing about her art that is gendered, and she displays no symbols of femininity in her paintings, which are created as a pure abstraction of forms. Even the names of her art are specifically vague, such as this one, Untitled, and as if refusing to ascribe themselves to anything at all. And through this, she asserts her right to be an artist on her own terms. So the question remains, why, despite Riley continually and publicly saying she doesn't want to be labelled by gender, is she still labelled by gender? These two articles I found here were on the first page of results when Googling her name. In calling her a female artist, they remove her ability to determine her art in her own terms. I also questioned whether even I should bring her up in this presentation, but I think it's a good example of the question, is there something reductive about tokenizing women's art based on gender of the artist alone? So in talking about stories of women's art in Glasgow, I think we have to pay homage to the group now known as the Glasgow Girls. So the Glasgow Girls were members of the Glasgow School of Art under the tutorship of Professor Francis Newbery during the late 19th century. Newbery and his wife promoted a view of the arts that brought the decorative art field to the same prominence as the fine arts. This allowed for the acceleration of talents in fields such as textiles, ceramics, and jewellery making, areas that had previously been ignored in art education. Many of the female artists in this group, some of whom are pictured in this photograph, collected together and eventually formed the Glasgow Society of Lady Artists, which allowed the women to work and exhibit together. Their artwork received wide acclaim, and it played a big part in defining the Glasgow style as we know it today. Jessie M. King, artist who is pictured in the gallery and who I've put in this presentation, was a member of the Glasgow Girls group. And this painting, The Honey-Coloured Moon, was intended as a panel for a children's bedroom. Much of her work fits into the category of the applied arts, and she was encouraged by Newbery to carry on in this field and to keep her distinctive style. So the interesting thing about the Glasgow Girls is the lack of acclaim they received after their deaths. They've only recently been revived in the 1990s after an exhibition at the Kelvingrove Gallery. Two members of the Glasgow Girls group that are now experiencing an explosion of popularity are the MacDonald sisters, Frances and Margaret MacDonald. As well as being considered Glasgow Girls, the sisters also comprise of two members of the Glasgow Four, along with their husbands, Charles Rennie Mackintosh and Herbert McNair. Their work draws on the style of the Art Nouveau movement and was highly regarded, and to the extent that Klimt put on an exhibition of their work in Vienna. One of the very many interesting facets of their sisters' work is their infusion of the decorative arts within their fine art painting, likely influenced by the tutorage of Frances Newbery. In Margaret's painting here, The White Rose and the Red Rose, she incorporates beadings and mixed media to adorn the panel as if adding jewellery. This decorative theme is mirrored by Frances in her painting Man Makes the Beads of Life, but Women Must Sew Them, where she clearly contends with the gendered nature of the decorative arts. In both works, the sisters blur the lines between the decorative and fine arts forms, settling on the works that feel profoundly modern. Similarly to the Glasgow Girls, the sisters' artistic legacy has until recently been obscured by the work of their husbands. Frances's husband, Herbert McNair, is even purported to have burnt most of her work after her death, removing her ability to ever have a retrospective legacy. It begs the question, why are women's artistic legacies so often obscured or completely hidden in favour of the art of men? So, in room 1 of the rehang of the gallery, curator Lola Sanchez Jaragui has intentionally left empty frames to question our gaps in the collection. As we reevaluate our collection, there are gaps of women artists, particularly women of colour, that come to the fore. There is also work to be done in our online collection to enable that women's art can be highlighted and not obscured by more prominent male artists, as has historically been the case. There is a revitalisation of the female artistic figures that is taking place, which can provide some hope for the future, for the collections of the future. But we must question if it takes categorising women artists as female to bring them to people's attention. So thanks for coming to the talk.